Those the bells at the Cathedral Notre Dame, which have not rung since the fire, but do here at this opening ceremony.
Oh, here I am in Paris.
The individual with the torch continues his trek.
Where's my bag at?
On the rooftops of Paris.
That's the sound of my bits.
Whee!
Oh, very cool.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. Here we are doing a live chat and it's the Olympics. Now that's something good that humans do, you know. They compete without killing each other. They embrace each other when we do our best. And that's really what we're supposed to be doing here, right? Doing our best. So have any of you been to Paris? Have any of you? Oh, I guess you don't want to go on. But what about you? What do you want? Is there anybody here? It's about 2:00. The Olympics are something to behold. Whenever humans do something extraordinary, it's usually done with love and sacrifice. And to like get in the Olympics, I was telling my friend, I had a girlfriend who was an Olympic skier. And I knew her from when we were both like 14. So she was an amazing skier at 14, right? But she didn't make the Olympics until she was about 16, right? And she was a downhill skier, meaning, you know, she whoop, and she went as fast as you could go. I mean, that's like the most insane thing. There is no real control. You just go, wah! And that was her. She loved doing that, right? And so she went to the Olympics and, you know, didn't medal, but she got close. You know, she was in there. And she got a medal for a team event, and but she didn't get an individual event. And so she was, you know, amazing girl, really amazing person, amazing human, and sweeter than sweet for the next Olympics. And she was doing great. and she was coming down, and they didn't prepare. It got warm, and it melted, and then it froze, and she was coming down that hill. Instead of hitting ice, instead of hitting snow, she hit ice and then dirt, and she flew through the air doing 60 miles an hour and hit a concrete um, pillar of the gondola, right? And that was it for her. She's lucky she was alive. She was lucky she could walk. She was lucky she wasn't paralyzed for the rest of her life. But she was messed up. And she basically came back to Maine, and she basically she came back, and they didn't quite have all the kind of things she needed. So she came to New York, right? And her mom and dad and her sister, who had at that time become a doctor, when I first met them all, she was a nurse. Anyway, they all came down, and she was at John Hopkins, and then she went to this specialty place where they did lots of operations. And I kind of hung out there with her for the 6 months she was in New York, because her sister had to go back to work. Her dad had to go back and run the town, and mom stuck around. And when mom had to go, I was still there. So that's, I was part of that family. And she, we were tight, right? So she got to a place where she didn't have to stay in a hospital. She wouldn't have any operation, but she needed a lot of physical therapy and stuff like that. So I was working on a project that had apartments, right? So, I told my boss, hey, I'm going to take one of these apartments. I have a girlfriend, and she needs so I got a really nice bed and a really nice place. And so we'd stay there, and I'd take her to physical therapy. And I had kind of been working in medical stuff by then. And she basically, got better, right? And but she was going to go back, to college, and then get into sports medicine after going through all of that. And she kind of did, and we stayed tight, and she'd come and visit, but we were no longer. I mean, we were still boyfriend girlfriend, but not boyfriend girlfriend. You know what I mean? And so she did great in school, and was going to go get her master's degree and go further. And her sister was, cheering her on, and their parents were all there for her, but there was just something wrong. And so she was up in Maine for a number of years, and one day I don't even know how she found me, but she did, and she was there in New York, and she needed to get an abortion, and they didn't have it in Maine, and so I helped her get through that, and she stuck out, So I wasn't with anybody, and she wasn't with anybody, and she lived in New York, and so I had kind of a nice place, and so again, I was like, I had a condo project, and I had, every time I do a project like that, I would first thing first. Pick a space for myself and fix it up immediately so I could be comfortable there, right? Whatever small apartment, whatever, blah blah blah. I'd fix that up and have a bed and bathroom and kitchen and a nice place to sit, and always a good view out the window, all of that. And so we had a place like that up on the Upper West Side, and she would jog through Central Park, and we had a really nice time, and we were really sweet on each other, and we could always be sweet. And it was interesting because our sweetness was that sweetness that when she was 16 and I was 14, right? And when we were boyfriend girlfriend, then I mean we were it, but we didn't, we kiss and hold hands and cuddle, but that's it, And but we just played tennis all the time and sailed. And her parents just, her dad loved me because I kept fixing everything in his farm and his. So, and the next summer I with him again all summer long, and then she, you know, was like getting really into the Olympic thing and training and all of that up there in Maine, and I was in prep school and all of that, and we wrote and we stayed this sweetness. It's There's a interesting thing about types of love, right? Agape love, and that's the love where you love unconditionally and you give everything and you really don't expect anything back. It's not transactional. Most relationships these days are transactional, and no, not many folk really. I mean, even after they get married and all that kind of, it's like those vows you take. I'll be with you through thick and thin, blah blah blah, and you're just doing it because one day you're going to be needing somebody to watch out for you, and they're not there, right? So when you're there for somebody without anything expected back, that's the most amazing thing. And that was our relationship. We loved each other unconditionally, and there were times when there was the you know because we were young, and once we got out of once we I mean, we really didn't have sex, until we were in our 20s. Even when she had that terrible accident and I hung out with her for a year, we would kiss and hug and I'd sleep in bed with her, but we would not have sex. And, but, when she came, before she got pregnant, um, she came and stayed with me for almost a year because she really liked New York. She liked all the hustle bustle, and she came from a teeny weeny eeny weeny eeny town that didn't even exist. It only existed there because there was a rich people kind of hotel slash and a prep school for rich people and a lake. But there was no town. It was just that. And her daddy kind of owned and ran everything because and it was generation. He was like the fifth generation of guys. He was a World War II bomber pilot, B-17. He met his T's mom in England during the Blitz, right? And she married him and came back to America, and she was great, and they're both great. And they had three girls, and they were all great, and it was a great family, right? And but the reason why she and I had this kind of relationship because I supported her completely in being an Olympian, right? And so she, somebody to have fun, to, be cozy with, and who could kind of slide into my life and slide out. Whenever she needed me, I was there. Until she got into her late 20s, and she got smashed up, and they fixed her up so she could get around, but she had a limp, and she had a couple of scars, and she had it psychologically damaged her, and at a certain point she committed suicide. And it wasn't like she wrote me a letter and said, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but I'll be dead when you read this. And you know you've been the best friend and best lover and the best all. I had a lot of sex just to see what sex was like, but with you it was this more than just the physicalness of it. It was this like transformation of another spirit. And so she said, I'm always there with you, I'll always be looking out for you. And she didn't like off herself. It was just basically there were things wrong with her, and she didn't want to take another operation, and she didn't want to take another, and she said, I start feeling like a lab rat. They're doing all these things to me, and just to see if they can keep me alive. And I had an extra, 15 years, and that's good enough. And so I'm not going to get any more of this, and I'm not going to come down to New York and wherever you are, uh, you know, and having you take care of me. So I'm not sending this, I'm going to be up here with my dad and my sisters, and I'm just going to fade away. And that's what she did. And so they didn't, she didn't want me to be there for her thing, but she sent me this, she said to her father, send this to Al, find where he is and send it to him. And it said, if you want to come up anytime and you can. And I did, because her family was really my family. And so when I watched the Olympics, especially Winter Olympics and downhill skiing, I think of all that I had with her. I remember the first time she took me skiing. She took me to this, suicide ski place where only insane people would go. And she took me all the way up there and just kind of pushed me off. Wah! And I came, flying down. And, that was one of the hills for, downhill racer, right? So, and, a guy who's never been on skis ain't supposed to be there. And she was just kind of zipping around me, making sure I didn't go off a cliff. A couple of times she just pushed me, and we did stuff like that. And so I have all these memories of that. So yes, I can feel sad, but it's not really. Oh, I'm heartbroken. People talk about losing someone, but if you always love them, you never really lose them. Right? You never try to own them, but you're always there for them. They're never going to leave you. So here it is, the Olympics, and I'm watching them, and it reminded me of tea, and I thought I'd tell you that little story. And I've been very blessed in my life to have extraordinary experiences and be involved with amazing people. And most of those amazing people were just ordinary folk. Meaning, if you met T on the street, you wouldn't know that she was an Olympian. She was just such a sweet, and that's why she loved being in New York, because when she was in Maine, everyone in Maine knew her, and so you know because she was in every kind of downhill ski race in Maine and New England there was, and in the United States, and she was top 5 downhill female skiers in America, and went to the Olympics twice, and so, but in New York, she loved being in New York. No one knew her, right? And she loved the fact that we could go anywhere and people knew me. And she said, I can't understand. This is a city of 18 million people. Everybody freaking know you. She said, not everybody, but yeah, a lot of people. And I'm taking you to places that people do know me because, it's more entertaining. But I'll take you to other places. But still, I would bump into things. That's because I did a lot of electric work. I did a lot of social activism, and I did a lot of art all over New York, for a good 20 years. And I never, never, never had to be, striving to be like Andy Warhol. I knew Andy really well. And he was always a sad guy because he was never comfortable in the room that he was in. Me, I just kind of cruise in and look for the food or the pretty girl or an interesting conversation or somebody who was like, and like the time I went to, I met David Bowie. I had no idea it was David Bowie, and like I took him all around Lower, into Lower Manhattan to Chinatown, Little Italy. We went on top of the Frankenstein parking lot owned by the mobsters that had the roller derby girls and pin bowling on top of the roof, and they were like grilling up sausage and other yummy Italian things, and it was and basically exotic dancer, titty dancing girls, but they were the girls who liked to get in a fight, and so they the rocks off by doing roller derby. And, it was on top of a building. If you reach, whee, you could go right up to the top of the building. And I took David Bowie up there, right? And, all the real gangsters were up there. And they were smart, to get to be an OG, you're not a dummy, And so, and they were talking about philosophy and art and culture. And David was like, and I had no idea it was David Bowie because he looked like he was out of JQ magazine, right? And so we had an amazing evening. And, I took them all around and I didn't have to flash any money because, when we went to Luna's, Grandma was, we went in the back and I sat in the kitchen. And they had this little dining alcove for the mobsters and the family. And, went back there and she, made the escarole and eggplant parmesan. I mean, that's what they had, eggplant parmesan and fish. And a really nice antipasto, a hot and a cold one, and a nice red wine, and good bread and cheese, and a nice, slice of, wedding cake. And, David, and then we, walked over to where the hobos were, right, and hung out in the hobo park, and then we went, into Chinatown. It was like 3 a.m, and we went into Chinatown and went into dim sum's places that never close, And I used to live in Chinatown. I worked for Herbert Wong, Hung and Young Electric, and I drove the unmarked white van and went up to Harlem. And because the Chinese guys owned a lot of real estate in Harlem in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I don't know why, the Chinese got along with Hispanic folk like they were their brothers, right? But black folk and Chinese just did not get along. So Chinese guys went up there to be the electrician. They, it would be difficult. But me, I knew a lot of people up there. So, and everyone knew what I was doing. So, but it was me. So they didn't give me a hard time. But I would do something for them. Mrs. Green, your light doesn't work. Here, let me fix that for you. So anyway, but Herbert Wong's daughter, Sarah, she was a real freebird, as Jar would say. And, I basically, she dated me just to piss her father off, right? She was going to NYU. She got a law degree and a degree in psychology and the film school. I mean, she was a brilliant girl, and she was just beautiful and tall. Her grandfather was pretty tall, but her father and mom were kind of short. But she was really tall. She's 6, my height, about 6 foot, and really gorgeous. And she was living. Her father owned a bunch of buildings on East Broadway underneath the Manhattan Bridge, and she's being an artist, and she could walk easily from there to NYU. It's like maybe 30 blocks, right? And she could jump on a bus too, right? And it would take her right there. And either way, she could do that. So I remember how I met her was her father said, you go to this building, I own this building. And, I've been, I've owned it 5 years. And, my brother runs this Chinese, butcher, bakery, restaurant-y kind of store. And I've never really had the time, but it's about to, burn down. Now my daughter's in this loft on top of the restaurant, and if it burned down with my brother in it, I don't care. But my daughter, yes. So I want to go there and suss it all out and fix whatever needs to be fixed. I said, okay, no problem. Went there. I knew the brother already, and everything was. So I started to fix the things that were most dangerous, and the cables going up to the girl's place was really, hardly. I'm amazed. So I knocked on the door. She answered, and this gorgeous, Asian goddess answers the door, and I say, "Hi." She goes, "I know you. You work for my dad." I said, "Yep. I'm here to fix." Walked me in, and she was basically naked, right? She was dancing, right? bikini. And so she's walking around, and she goes, don't mind me. I said, don't worry, I'm not minding you. And so, I went over there, and I kind of was looking at something, but I was looking at her, and I was not paying attention to what I should be doing, and it was, a nasty box, and it exploded. It kind of blew me back, and I played it for, it kind of, and she's like, because I was watching her watch me watch her while I was doing this, and it exploded, and she came running over, and she's like, leaning over, and she's nearly exposed, and I could see her aureolas, and she's smiling. I'm smiling. She goes, "You did that on purpose, didn't you? Just so I would bend over you." I said, "You like the view?" And so she goes, "You look dirty." And I said, "So do you." And so she goes, "The shower works here." So that was the beginning of our being a liaison. So that was Herbert's daughter, brilliant and gorgeous, and loads of fun, right? So we had that kind of relationship for 2 years, right? And um, and I was still going to schools. So, I would be there for big chunks of time, like 3 or 4 months here, 3 or 4 months there. And I was very good. Herbert liked that because I could just jump in and do anything. And, you know, my mentor, he was the big electrician, Chinese electrician in New York, but he didn't have a license. But, Mike and Grandpa, this is Mike's job. I said, yep. And so that was basically what it was. And so Dorothy, and, Chinese girl named Dorothy. So she loved the fact that we could be this crazy, couple, and then I'd be gone for 2 or 3 months and come back, and then we'd be a thing for 3 or 4 months, and then I'd be gone. And she loved that because she could get her rocks off and have loads of fun. And I had working in all these clubs and nightclubs and dance halls and I had friends at I'd gone to Juilliard, so I knew all these people in the art world, and she just loved that. And we made quite the couple, right? So that was, and so that when I was with her was at a time when T showed up and needed an abortion, and D, she basically took over. Said, "You need a sister. I'm your sister," right? And T had 2 sisters, but she knew what a sister was like, especially one that loved her, and they became sisters, right? So, and that was another beautiful thing to have that kind of relationship with 2 women in my life living with me, and that they weren't jealous or competitive, and that they loved each other. And see, that's what I'm talking about. I've been around that kind of love, you know, my whole life, right? And so that is what has allowed me to be not worrying about myself, you know, because what makes me happy is to make others happy, right? Not myself. I'm taken care of. I don't have to worry, right? I mean, like last night, the Bears came in and attacked my little deep green, and they were playing football with my refrigerator. And it's a big refrigerator. My neighbor, instead of throwing it away, she gave it to me. And the freezer really works. So I put everything on the freezer side. I turn it on. I get it to where everything's almost frozen. Then I turn it off, and it keeps it cold enough for the rest of the day. But sometimes it goes a little past that, and so it can bring yummy odors out into the world. And I guess it got too much for so it was either Bigfoot or the Bears. I couldn't tell because it was this gigantic bear about the size of my car, so I don't quite, and there were no bear prints on the ground. There were on the refrigerator, big, gigantic, boy kind of prints, and knocked it over, right? And I had the doors kind of superficially closed. You couldn't open them because I had stuck pieces of wood in the hinges so it just wouldn't open. Right? It was like and whoever it was throwing this. I mean, this thing weighed about 300 pounds, and they were throwing it around like a Rubik's cube. But they didn't attack, you know, the deck, and which they could because it's right there. They could have gotten upset and just rummaged through everything, but they didn't. They could have come over and, gone into where I was sleeping because I, keep the doors, the, the door that I can lock, I keep open and leave the screen door so there's a breeze there at night. And they didn't. But, like they played Rubik's Cube and I tried to write it, man. I couldn't lift that sucker. It was like bent over and leaning against the deck. Wasn't, but I could see that they knocked it down. They turned it around 3 or 4 times and left it, leaning against the deck. It was like, hmm. And so that's my life. I mean, that's more a paranormal experience than the bear because there were no bear prints. Right? There were no, common what bears would have done. Meaning, after playing with that refrigerator, and they couldn't get in, you would think, that they would rummage through everything because everything is on the deck there. If they went through everything, they could have found something to nibble on, but they didn't. They didn't destroy the place. So that's been my life. My life is like that. I can get like upset. What? Oh my God! Well, my neighbor was going to throw the refrigerator out. It's not like I bought it. It was work for a good year, and the Bears haven't, or whoever hasn't played with it. And it's still, I just need to find somebody else to help me lift the thing up and put it on straight, or I will, do what Yoda did, and lift the starfighter up. But see, it's all okay, you know. If I, so today I was with the boys, who we make the birdhouses, right? And most of the crew was there. Not everybody was, and pretty much between age and self abuse, none of the folk are there. I mean, half of us are just old and we're going to die soon, right? And the other half are, just coming out the other side of drug and alcohol abuse, right? And so but we were knocking them out. We knocked out about 40 birdhouses, and we had a pretty good time. But at about 2 o'clock, us old guys were like, so we kind of broke, and the other guys went off for lunch. And one of the old guys took the guys for lunch, and we'll drop them off where they live in the woods. And so I was just talking to the other old guys, saying, us old guys, we're just waiting to die. And they said, yeah, but we're having a good time doing it. And see, that's kind of what it is. So it's pushing on towards 3 o'clock. It's about 33 minutes. There's one of you there. If you want to say something, the chat is waiting for you. So here it is, the opening day of the Olympics in Paris, and I watched a good portion of that, and it is very Parisian, meaning let's see, you are a great storyteller. No, thank you. That's why I'm known as a griot. That's what griots do. We tell stories. Yeah, was listening. Yeah, and that is a talent into itself to listen. You know, that's why elephants never forget. They got these big ears; they hear everything, right? So, a big thing to do. When I couldn't speak, everything. So I basically was trained to listen to everything. So that's a good thing. Um, so and see, I've never had any plans for my life. I just have a life, right? and I do my best, right? And I endeavor to serve, love, creation, right? And I got that. My grandma kind of put that in me through um, her example. The people I lived with in that brownstone in Harlem, they all were doing. They weren't trying to get over. They weren't trying to steal anything. They weren't trying to get the government to give them stuff. No, they were out and out doing their best to have whatever their dream was. They were true Americans, and that was the beauty of Harlem in the '50s. Nobody was trying to get over. There were not even any cops. They had grandmas. I mean, if you tried to you did something inappropriate on the other side of town, some grandma saw you. When you got home, your grandma knew about it, right? So there were all these people around me as a young man who weren't my mom and dad or my uncle or any of those that bloodline, just my grandma and all these other people who were great examples, right? And would take me aside and teach me lessons. And because I couldn't really, because I had such a bad stutter, um, I just listened, right? And really took it all in, right? And learned how to listen. There was this one. I've been very exposed to many cultures. Second Avenue is like every 2 blocks a different nationality: Italian, Lithuanian, Polish, this, that, Irish, German, and not just those guys, but 10 different types of Irish. There's 12 counties in Ireland. There'd be different types of Irish folk, right? Same thing with the Italians. There's the Northern Italians, the Southern Italians, the Italians on the islands. That's where my grandma came from. So she was more Gaelic than Italian, Roman, right? Her husband came from Rome, and he was totally 100% Roman, right? My uncle Harry, who was my grandma's brother. Um, I never quite got the story straight why he was Sicilian and she was Gaelic, but anyway, um, so I had all these people. My uncle Steve, who was not, my neither nobody in my family. They weren't blood, but Uncle Steve was the husband of my mother's. When she was head of nursing, she had this crew of nurses that were her team. Um, and so about 6 of them were her best friends: my Aunt Gracie, Aunt Wynne, Mrs. Frizz, a few others, and but mostly Aunt Wynne and Aunt Gracie. And so they were like my Aunt Wynne and Aunt Gracie were like my you know other surrogate mothers, right? And Uncle Steve really took it upon himself to be, because he was an engineer, electrical. He was an electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, and a civil engineer. He was every kind of engineer you could be, right? And his father worked for Caterpillar and invented virtually everything that Caterpillar is. But because he wasn't part of the family, or he had a comfortable life, but he designed and invented things that were with if it was his build, Uncle Steve would have been a billionaire. So Uncle Steve was well educated, well experienced, but watched how things weren't fair. So he taught me how to do, electric work. I worked, Gray Electric before Grandpa Stahl and Mike Stahl. I worked like at 6 for Gray Electric. And, Bob Gregg was, again, he was a guy who he had no son. And so I became his surrogate son, at 6. And I was great as like, I would go off with him, and I would he had little bags of tools, right? We are going to do controls. He had one bag of tools. If we were going to look for, troubleshoot something, he had another bag of tools. And so and I would carry the bag, like doctor's bags, black bags. We go in, and I'd be, give me this, I'd be like his nurse, handing him the tool. I knew exactly what he needed next. I'd hand it to him, and so I got that through Uncle Steve, because Uncle Steve knew Greg really well, And so, and so on the other side when I wasn't hanging out with Gray Electric, I was hanging out with Uncle Steve, and Uncle Steve really taught me about how to do everything. You're going to do it right the first time, not, and don't rush through it, because if you take your time and finish the job, you'll save a lot of time on the other side. And he was right. And he really, wax on, wax off. Mr. Miyagi, Uncle Steve was my Mr. Miyagi. And so I have these people in my life, right? Great women, great men teaching me, whereas my parents were like, feral weasels, you know, and so I really didn't. They had their good points, and my uncle Steve used to tell, and my uncle Aunt Wynn would say the same thing. Your parents had really good points. Just lean. Your brothers and sisters really aren't getting it because they fight your parents, and you can't fight either of those guys. You'll never win. But if you lean into the better side, you'll be a better you'll have a better relationship. And I did my whole life with my parents. That's kind of what I did, right? Now, I was a cheeky monkey too. I would do stuff that would just they couldn't believe I did that, and like my dad, right? So he a number of times he just burnt me. I built him 4 different houses, right? And he never paid me. He never, and that was fine because every time I would do that, like the first house I kind of built for them was in Shelter Island, Long Island, which is this island between Long Island looks like a fish, and on the tail of the fish there's Shelter Island. My father bought this piece of property that was like people couldn't understand. It was really cheap, but it was right on the beach. It was really thin and really long, and they had building codes, and it said you could only build on a lot that was X big. And so this lot wasn't square, but it was a long rectangle, so it was really long. And it also that part of the thing was it had to have certain amount of footage on the road. Well, there was a road that went down to the beach. Well, didn't look like a road, but on the books it was a road. And so my dad knew that and bought this thing for nothing. And the rich guy above, who had a big lot, a big house, had a nice view, but he couldn't go on the beach, right? And my father wouldn't let him go on his because this guy used to just come down and go on the beach. But then my dad bought the lot and said, "Nope, can't do that." And so he wanted to put a house there, and Mrs. Frizz, one of my mom's best friends, that's how we got to Shelter Island. She came from there, and she had a really nice house in that where the ferry was. And we would, summers stay with her. We'd rent houses there. And that's how my dad kind of, figured the place out and found this lot over the years, right? And bought it. And he had a running thing on with this guy. Anyway, so Mrs. Frizz, I get there and I start fixing things in her house. And she has a friend whose son is a new architect, and so I go visit him, and he's a really smart guy. So we built this what was like a farmhouse slash fisherman's cabin, but it was a really nice house. And had a basement because this long thing went up the hill. You could put a basement in there because if it was flat, you'd be right on the same water level as Long Island Sound, and your basement would be a swimming pool. So we did that, which gave it a higher, that the house sit high up, and I just started doing it. My dad said, "I want to build a house here," so found an architect. My mom wanted X, Y, and so she would design something on a napkin, and the architect, and he hadn't finished school. I was, fixing Mrs. Her. She knew who was an engineer, and Uncle Steve knew him too. And so he had the licensing thing that you could put on your drawing. And the guy who was the inspector had my name, right? So he thought I was and he just was on this island and he was watching me do all this stuff. and just kind of, not really poking anyone in the eye, but always navigating myself around people to get what I wanted without really sticking to anybody. And so, and he didn't like the rich guy who built the big house up there because he kind of bullied his way into getting what he wanted and never got what he wanted. Me, we built this really cool little thing that fit all of the little things you had to have to do it on that piece of property to, fit the codes. And so the engineer knew all that. He took my mom's napkins and did a drawing. The architect added architectural kind of motifs. And that engineer and me took it to the inspector. He said, "Oh, this is great. Sure, do it." So, and I just kind of did it. And um, and my parents were still living in Newark, and they never came and looked at any of it. I mean, my mom did everything on napkins, and she would come, and there was a train that came straight from Manhattan, straight to Shelter Island, right? It was a slow train, and you had to change in Jamaica, Queens, but it was a train, right? And so she would come and do it. And she and Aunt Gracie would come and stay with Mrs. Frizz and, play canasta and get a buzz on and get away from the kids and my dad. And you know, and she would say, "Yeah, that's great, that's great, that's good." And my mom was the boss anyway. So we built that house, and it was nothing like anyone had ever seen, but it was just like what was there 150 years ago. That was the beauty of it. So the people who were the historian guys said, "Well, this is great," whereas all the rich people, "But it doesn't look like my modern French house when you blah 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 blah." And so all those rich people got all upset because they did not have something on the beach. This thing did. It was right on the beach. So I lived in that thing for a good 2 years while I was building it. I was not like rushing to build it. I was just, we put in the foundation, put on the floor, put up the walls, put up the roof, and that was the first 4 months. And then I took my time, right? And I would find a few interesting craftsmen and tradespeople who had issues, just got out of jail or just got out of rehab or, all the above. This is in the 70s. And I'm still basically in high school. And the end part of my high school, I was going to college too. I was at Juilliard and a few other places. And that's why I learned you didn't have to matriculate to go to school, right? Or even be on their books, right? So that was fun. And that's how you made real connections because all these kids would be going to college and I'd be hanging out with the guys who were heads of the department. That's how I got in there. Anyway, so, and then I had this place and I would bring all those people from New York, artists and people in theater, and they would stay in this nice house right on the beach. And anyway, so all of the above, I did all of that. And then my parents moved in, right? And I built myself a nice little apartment down in the basement and I could go there anytime I wanted. And because my parents hadn't moved in, right? They did, once they moved their family business from Brooklyn to Long Island, that's where my dad went to. And but so it was already built, he'd already been living in it. He already got it the way he wanted. I had the downstairs, and that was fine. And then one day he decides he's bought this other piece of property, and you know, it's it is exactly this book right here. Ugh, where is hold on. Ugh, ugh, yeah, I got to get up anyway, otherwise I'll rust here. Whoa, 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 baby. I used to work for these guys. This book, it's the first book I bought at the Dollar Tree, and it is all about Remsenburg. They don't call it Remsenburg, and all the people in it lived in Remsenburg when I was there, right? So it's Well, Bellwether, Bellwether, by Susanna Susanna Kesley Kearsley. Very good book, right? New York Times bestseller, right? Cost $34. Dollar Tree, $1. Even now that things are $1.25, their books are $1. At least at my Dollar Tree. And I've gotten other really good books there too. So, and I've started a book club here with the girls at the Cracker Barrel, right? So in that college town where the Cracker Barrel is, those college girls, they can make $100 to $200 a shift at that Cracker Barrel, right? Because mostly it's tourists, mom and dad coming to visit the kids at the college, any of that. And so they give them the special treatment, and dad will, oh, she's just like my daughter, so gives them a nice $20 tip instead of $2. And so anyway, I go there. That's one of my places I go. I do shows from there. And if you go back and watch them, you can see the girl. I never show anyone their face when I'm at a place and I'm talking to them live on the show. I never, bust them out. So anyway, the girls are. So this one girl, she's like, "Oh, you're reading all these books. Where you get them?" I want to. I'm no longer. I finished college and, you know, save my money to go do something else, and I love reading. So where'd you get these books? I said, "Oh, the Dollar Tree." And I just finished another book, and I gave it to her. Right? It's about this murder mystery in France, which is interesting, right? And again, I'm watching the Olympics on Paris. I lived in France for about 4 months in my travel times, and that book about the murder in this little town of Provence, in France, um, is exactly what it's like, right? It couldn't be any better, and the characters are all kind of people that you would meet in a French cafe. Anyway, a neighborhood one, not a touristy one, right? Where everyone comes to have their little their little espresso in the morning, their little glass of wine around 11, their little glass of wine with cheese and their baguette around 2 o'clock. Anyway, so I gave her that book, and she said, "Wow, this is great." And I just kept feeding her books, and she kept giving them to the other girls who work there, and they're like work buddies, but they're not, they didn't go to school together, they didn't take the same kind of, blah, 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 but they're kind of buddies through working with each other. And so now it's become a book club. And I'm telling them, well, girls, this is what you need to do. Come to the Deep Green, and we'll have book night, and I'll cook you dinners. And anyway, so we're moving into that, and then I'm telling them, listen. So listen, you're in this college town, rents are ridiculous. You live in this teeny little apartment with 4 other people and pay $800. Come on. Why don't you just camp out here for the next 3 or 4 months? You're through college. You're just doing this to make money, and this way you can save all that money. You don't have to pay that $800, right? And at the end of, like, when we get to around October and it's getting a little colder, we close up here and we go in one of your cars, which is the best car. This one girl, her dad gave her a big, like, Tahoe or something, and brand new, like $70,000. So this thing could drive to the moon and back, and not need the oil change, rather than my white whale that it's, I, you know it's good for me around here, but to take a trip to like Florida in it, I don't know. But so that's what we're talking about, that kind of thing. So, flea dog, you got fleas, not in my lap. Yes, stay on that chair. Look, and just jump on me. That's one thing I don't. Anyway, um, my buddy, he's got 2 dogs and 8,000 cats. Right? Of course, they have fleas. No flea collars, no nothing. Just, Anyway, so that's holler living. Yes. And so, did you get a flea on me? No. Better not. I'll show you Maggie. There she is. Okay. No, 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 no. Go on. No, go on. Scott. Go to daddy. So anyway, so that's what having a life's about. I don't worry about anything. I don't have any expectations. I don't go, oh, I wish I had, oh, I want that. Oh, no, I don't. Whatever God brings my way is what I'm going to do, right? And so I'm not worrying about nothing because one day soon I'll be dead, right? So I'm not worrying about nothing. Like right now, I'm going back to not wearing any. It took 10 months to get these orthopedic shoes, and yeah, they are a bit better than the things I had. But I was wearing all kinds of braces. I put my braces back on and said, nope, 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 not doing that anymore. I'm going to, you know, exercise every muscle in my leg, not wear a brace that is, a thing that weakens my leg. So anyway, that's kind of how I roll. I do the best I can do. Right. I've had all these great teachers in my life and all these great experiences. So I built I built my parents 4 different houses, right? And did they ever pay me? No. Did they ever leave me the house? No. I built this one house and I thought it was going to be mine. But my parents gave it to my other sister. And then she burnt it to the ground. She took the insurance money and left. And so, did I get upset about that? Actually, no, because I all of these things. So the first house I did for them on the beach, I had that house as a beach house for me for 5 years before my parents actually took it over. Right? I kind of sussed all of Shelter Island out and got a ton of clients because of that house. Right? So I made a ton of money from that, and it was no big deal. It was no effort because I was always working on this thing. People would come over, I'd have cheese and bread and wine, and we'd talk. And the first thing I had the downstairs that went right out onto the beach, right? And it was up, from where the water high tide was to up where you walked into the basement because the whole basement wall facing the ocean wasn't basement concrete wall, it was glass, right? So the whole thing, and I had this big, beautiful slate patio just straight off into it, right? And I had this big metal door that I could slide. I mean, if there was going to be like a hurricane, I could just slide it in there, and the water could come up, 2-4 feet above the grade of the basement floor, and it would still keep the water from going in there, right? So I had it sussed out. So it was great for about 4 or 5 years. I had my beach house. So did I have to pay for it? No. Did I have to pay for any of the materials? No. As I built it, whatever materials that I was, didn't need on that, I would take over and do it on another project. I did that, right? Um, to do that house, I definitely needed a vehicle. So my dad got a vehicle, right? So did I insure it? No. Did I own it? No. I drove it around for 5 years, right? And so, when my father said, okay, I'm going to sell this house, you got to get out. Well, I'd already realized that 2 years before and had nothing there. I said, fine, and went on. And then, a couple of years later, he does this thing in Remsenburg. He buys this beautiful piece of property. The house was from pre-revolutionary times that had, and at the time, Stony Brook had a girlfriend who was an architectural historian. He got all kinds of, grants and all kinds of things. And my dad would freak out. And then I fixed it all up with an architectural magazines. She got unbelievable business out of that house, right? So there I have this, buddy still. And, we were really sweet and had a really nice 2 years of being a fang, and and I now, so I had this architect, and she was the girl who was in New York City and was worked for the company that did Trump Tower, right? And when um, she was on the group that was doing the lobby for Trump Tower, and Trump was such a dweeb um, that it drove her boss insane, and he had a heart attack and had to, quit that, right? And so she was second in charge, and so she got in charge of the lobby, which is a pretty big deal, right? Now she was a pretty big deal because of what we did in Long Island and what she did after that, and then she worked for this big company, and she was number two on this lobby, and that was another big thing. But they couldn't make up their mind, so it's getting close to opening, and I lit it like a theater piece, and we had the opening, and there was a big back wall that they hadn't done anything to it. So I had them basically paint everything black and gold, and the back wall I had a waterfall come down, right, and we made a nice, like, front desk of a hotel, right, like a concierge, and but and made the elevator bank very fancy. We put that kind of slaty, you know, marbly kind of tile, big tiles that you right just stick it on there with glue, and so 3 months we did that, and it worked out great. It was like a big success. And oh, look at this lobby, it's so beautiful, but it was a theater piece, right? And then they did whatever they did to it now because it was a mezzanine upstairs. We kind of just said we're going to paint that all black and not light it so people wouldn't even know it's there, right? So, meaning basically, you walked in, you saw this waterfall and this concierge gold black thing that said Trump and the white marbly um, elevator bank over there, and that was the lobby. That was it. And these big, gigantic windows out onto Fifth Avenue. So anyway, so that was my architectural sweetie, right? And she was great. All the years I lived in New York, whenever I needed a stamp on it stuff, or whenever, again, she was another sweetie that if she wasn't involved with somebody and I wasn't, we would have a nice, tete-a-tete for a few weeks or a month or however long. And sometimes she loved going on the road with me. When we were out there in Shelter Island, I was always on the road. I had my dad's car. I had a credit card for gas from my dad. You know. So I did not worry about, oh, what am I going to get from this? Right? No, it worked out great. When I did the Rensenberg house and met the architectural girl, same thing. I, got another truck and da da da. And this time we were supposed to have a business 50-50, and we made a big empire. I just kept building stuff and buying stuff and making stuff. And my dad didn't understand any of that business, so he freaked out about everything. But our lawyer, who was a real estate lawyer, kept telling my father, "Your son is like the golden goose. Look, you've only been in business 18 months. He has fixed 4 buildings, and you have a rent roll of $43,000 a month. What are you complaining about?" "Well, he's spending money." I said, "Yeah, but you're making twice as much, right? It's a good business." So anyway, and at a certain point, when I bought this 100 acres right in this place called the Mauritius, which is right. If you read this book here, it talks all about that. It describes the road that, that the 100 acres that I had right on the Atlantic Ocean. And I bought for 100 grand. 100 acres, like a thousand an acre or something like that. But anyway, and so my father freaked out when I did that. Like I said, we were still making way more money. Like 2 months is what my girlfriend, all these buildings, some moron was trying to burn up old buildings, the things that, because there were a lot of pre-revolutionary, pre-Civil War buildings, and some guy was burning them down, right? And burning up the history, kind of like Syria, right? So, I basically, oh, how much time is the battery? Oh, I got to go. But anyway, the story, the meaning to all this story here is that don't worry about anything. Just do your best and have a life and do it in co-creation with God's love and do it through the doorway because Jesus is always standing right there by the side of unconditional forgiveness. Okay, kids, love you.